All right, thank you all for joining us for another Bluegrass Real Estate Investors Group lunchtime meetup. I am super excited for this one because we have Teddy Rodgers from Anderson Rodgers General Contracting and Construction. I hear that this guy is a wealth of knowledge. But first off, I do want to thank, Rebuild Investments for letting us host these meetings on their business account so we can do them as long as we need to with no Zoom restrictions. So definitely keep Rebuild in mind for all of those. So I got Teddy with me today. How you doing, Teddy?
Good, doing good, Jim.
So for those that are kind of watching or going to watch this replay too, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Anderson Roger Construction for those that aren't familiar?
Sure. Anderson Rodgers Construction, general contractor. We do residential and commercial projects. On the residential side, we do mostly, high-end remodel, flip a few houses, a little bit of multifamily. On the commercial side, do a lot of build outs, do some ground up construction, medical, restaurant, retail, um, office, pretty much just about any of the commercial projects out there, uh, up to a certain point. We're not going to do 10 and $15 million projects. Most likely, we're going to do instead 10 to 15 $1 million projects.
Yeah, and actually Teddy sent me over a history of his company, and it's pretty impressive resume from everything from residential to commercial to single family, multifamily, flips, renovations, and so definitely this guy knows everything there is about general contractors and construction, especially here in Kentucky. But kind of to get rocking and rolling into it, just as a reminder that anybody watching on Facebook or on Zoom, definitely ask your questions in chat and I'll make sure we get to them. We do have some pre-made questions, but I definitely want to make sure that any questions that you have, we get to those. So just type those in. So if I wanted to be a general contractor in Kentucky, what do I need to do? Can I just print up a couple business cards and start swinging hammers at homes? Or like, is there a application process, or what kind of education criteria do I need to meet to be a official general contractor in Kentucky?
Well, it's fortunate and unfortunate on that side. There's not a whole lot of criteria to being a general contractor. If you wanted to go out and start one, register with the state, apply for insurance, start an LLC or a corporation, and you're pretty much off to the races. Most most cities are going to require licensing individually. So Georgetown, Richmond, Lexington, all are going to have their own individual license that you're going to have to pay for. They want to make sure to get their cut.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, got a question from Gerald on Facebook. How hard are you having it to get supplies right now? He's getting killed on the HVAC side. So is COVID slowing you down on any materials or supplies for jobs?
They're slowing it down a little bit. I would say, though, more concerning than that is the increase we're seeing in lumber right now. I think lumber's up 24% on the year. It's the notification I received the other day. So, what that's going to do is that's going to be a major change order, which is a nasty word for most homeowners and most investors. But at this point, that's somewhere in the realm of, not counting the labor side, 15 to 17% increase on typical framing and lumber packages.
So when did you see that kind of start?
Well, National Home Builder Association sent out a memo, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I started hearing about it probably 3 to 6 weeks ahead of that, when people were telling me it was on the way, that there was going to be a lumber shortage and we were getting ready to see a spike in lumber, um, and a substantial one at that.
Wow, that's definitely great insight. And I know that you had wrote on your history too that you have been a general contractor for a pretty long time, and you were around even during the housing recession. What was it like being a general contractor during those times? And is anything that you're seeing right now in COVID times kind of similar or scaring you a little bit in your industry?
I think the good contractors were able to stay busy. You weren't able to be as selective on what kind of jobs you took. As I typically say, we had to slum it up a little bit. Found ourselves doing a lot of odd jobs that we wouldn't have typically taken on. But even in times like this, other contractors are saying they're slow right now, I would expect just aren't the same criteria of contractors that are out there that are busy, because most contractors I talk to right now that are good quality companies, they're swamped. They're taking on as much as they can handle.
So what's kind of your busy season and which is your slow season?
Usually Thanksgiving through mid-January is our slow season. We start, honestly, it's somewhat controlled. I don't like working through the holidays for people. It's a high level of stress for most of our customers. It's also a lot of trips. There's a lot of planning. They've got people coming to their houses. This year may be different, but generally speaking, the holidays is not a fun time to work for people. So we kind of every year from Thanksgiving through mid-January expect it to be really slow, and we allow our employees to have quite a bit of time off during that window as well.
Right. So what type of insurance do you carry, and what type of insurance do you have like for your employees or day laborers that you require?
Workman's comp, general liability. You always want to make sure you've got at least 1 to 2 million in general liability. As far as workman's comp, every employee's got to be covered under workman's comp by state law, which protects you and the clients that you work for. Also, one insurance policy that a lot of people don't talk about is if you're doing a major construction project on somebody's house or a new construction, you should also carry a builder's risk policy, which is going to handle situations such as a flood, tornado, act of God type situations where the homeowner's policy wouldn't cover an addition unless they've already upped their homeowner's coverage. So generally speaking, we apply a builder's risk policy to any project that's got a major renovation going on.
And that's something that you all do on your end, and it's not something that I, as like a homeowner, would have to add on as well.
It's never a bad idea for you as a homeowner to increase your homeowner's policy at the same time. Let your insurance company know what you're doing. But if your builder doesn't get a builder's risk policy, you can apply for your own builder's risk policy under your own name. It's similar to some kind of umbrella policy. It's just not something that a whole lot of people talk about. But every project, if you're popping an addition on or you're doing anything over probably $50,000 to the house, you should have a builder's risk policy just in case.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful because like if you're doing a lot of work on a house, you have risk of water damage, fire, things like that, and just with all the moving parts and stuff going around. And along those lines with like safety and security, how do you kind of secure a job site? I know a lot of people have had problems with like theft or like copper theft, tool theft, things like that. Like, how do you kind of avoid some of those problems when you're on the job site but have to leave for the day?
That's not an easy one. We had a door kicked in within the last, 3 or 4 weeks. We've had, in times of recession, we've had squatters try to live in houses under construction. It's something you can't completely guard from. I think most people, there's risk analysis as to what the extra cost would be to put security cameras in or add extra patrol, but there's certain points that you want to protect, especially that's going to be times when you have extremely valuable and easy to steal items there. We don't deliver appliances until the last possible thing because that's something that could easily be lifted off a job. Cabinets, we try not to have cabinets sitting on the job until we're ready to install. Just about any product is can be and has been stolen off of job sites that I've been involved with.
Yeah. So you have a squatter story. You that say the squatter story. How did that play out? And
it would freak you out if you open a closet door and you find somebody laying inside of a house that you're building. But it's actually happened more than once. I've done this almost 20 years, and we had at some point dozens, if not a 50, 60 houses under construction all at the same time. And so it's just about impossible to monitor all of them and monitor them every day. So I can remember twice. I remember a realtor walked into a new construction project probably a decade or so ago, and they opened a closet door and there was somebody sleeping on the floor in the closet. Scared the living hell out of them, but that's I can't remember exactly where the other one was, but yeah, I think there's been at least two, maybe three times that that's happened.
Right. Jay on Facebook wants to know how much work do you self-perform versus subbing out?
Uh, we don't we don't perform a whole lot of work anymore. We subcontract 99% of our work. So several years ago, we performed probably anywhere from 60 to 70% of the work ourselves. But once you start performing that much work, you end up with more tools on top of each other than you can really handle and keep up with. Because the other thing is too is like if you've got a drywall, contractor versus a tile contractor, that's two different skill sets. And so if you're asking your drywall guy to lay tile or vice versa, it's at some point they're not going to be as good at the skills as you need them to be. So we hire professionals for pretty much all trades, and the 1% is probably punch work, cleanup, and you know, and then of course we project manage.
Yeah. Um, when's it necessary to pull a permit for work? I know we had talked about that a little bit before we got started, but definitely dig into it again for us.
Yeah, sure. 6 to 8 weeks before you start. Now, part of this is if you got a trusted architect and you know they're delivering a quality set of plans, you can probably move that up to 2 or 3 weeks before you're ready to start. But if you're unsure about your architect, you're not familiar with what needs to be included in your plans, the sooner the better to have it go through plan review. Make sure that they don't have any issues. As I mentioned, building inspection takes no civil liability on any type of structural issues, structural concerns, and on major remodels, when you might be relocating a load bearing wall or adding an addition that potentially bears on an existing foundation, they're going to want engineer reports. And if you don't know that, you're going to need some time to prep that, have an engineer come out, possibly inspect and qualify the footings, or tell you how to transfer the load properly, add additional piers, and so on and so forth. So the sooner you start the process, the better, especially if you're unfamiliar with it and not sure what the actual building department's going to require beyond a set of architectural plans.
Yeah. So if I want to do like say a bathroom renovation, we do a lot of buy and hold rental type stuff. I'm doing just some basic stuff, maybe bathroom fitter, new vanity, lights, things like that. Do I need a permit for that?
By Lexington standards, they're going to say you need a permit for anything that you do. And that's going to include just a small remake of a bathroom. You go to other counties, they probably wouldn't require that you pull a permit. They'd want you to pull electrical. But if your plumbing's not being relocated, technically on plumbing, if you're not moving plumbing openings more than 10 feet, you don't have to pull a plumbing permit. And so I think that that's going to be a question that you're going to have to gauge with the building department. Not all building departments are going to care or necessarily want the headache of coming out and inspecting a small project like that. But in Lexington, they're going to ask you to pull a permit no matter what you do to the house. Obviously, if you painting the exterior or something like that, putting up a ceiling fan, I'm not going to recommend pulling a permit. But if you're doing any type of renovation that requires pulling something out, putting something back in, they say also if you're cutting open a wall or exposing any studs, but that's just something that's going to have to be gauged with the local department.
Right. Have you worked like any historical district type stuff, and like how's the process with that?
Pain in the ass. I mean, just to be honest with you. Yeah, we've worked with it. We did one down by Cheapside. We did a facade on the front of the building. Definitely something that they're going to take their time in processing it. You may not be satisfied with the outcome of their judgment. We had one where we were requesting to replace the windows on the property because the windows were really old and the Historic Society ruled that we could restore the windows, not replace them. And, in that sense, so you have these old inefficient windows with ropes and lead weights, and you've got to put storm shutters on to get any kind of efficiency out of them. Not storm shutters, but storm glass. It's one of those things like I understand and I respect what they're doing, but at the same time, you're kind of in their hands, and they're going to tell you how they want you to do it, mostly with the front of the building and the facade. It's not really going to apply to the interior. But if you're adding any kind of addition or changing the exterior at all, you're going to have to go through their process, which could be lengthy because they only meet, I think, once a month. And, they may or may not rule that they need information. So my recommendations: do your homework ahead. Also work with an architect who's familiar with dealing with the historic board, or even potentially on the historic board, because that's going to help get your project pushed through faster. But yeah, it's a lot to deal with.
About how long do you think it takes? I know it said they only meet like once a month, but are they listening to basically every single case during that month and then kind of on pause until the next month? And are they working right now?
I don't know if they're working right now. Fortunately, I haven't had anything come through, but they are good about coming out and kind of examining and looking at things ahead of time. We've dealt with them before where they've come out and they've given us their advice or recommendations, or talked to us about what they felt like would be discussed and how it would be ruled upon. So my recommendation would be give yourself at least 3 months and call them on the front end of that, ask them to come out, discuss what you're wanting to do to the property, and see if there's even, kind of almost do a feasibility study. And any architect who's familiar with them can probably real quick tell you whether what you're thinking about doing is going to be feasible.
Yeah. Do you sign a release of liens whenever you start your jobs?
We make our subcontractors all sign release of liens. Generally speaking, most residential customers don't request it, but all of the commercial customers, as well as anybody who has bank financing, is going to request, a signed lien release. So, as an investor, I would recommend that you ask every subcontractor to sign a lien waiver and figure out who their materials come from, and make them have their material supplier also sign a lien waiver, because we had a paint contractor years ago sign a lien waiver, but we didn't make Sherwin-Williams sign a lien waiver, and Sherwin-Williams came after that painter for several $1,000s after the fact. So not only do you have to make sure you get your actual subcontractor to sign one, you also need to make sure their supplier does as well.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful, and I've never heard anybody mention that before, but it does make a lot of sense. What's a typical draw schedule for one of your projects?
Well, you're going to have a duration that's going to dictate that. Typically, we're going to draw, every 2 to 4 weeks, just depending. So most of the time, what we try to do is we try to do 4 draws. We'll try to do like a 25% deposit, and do 25, 35, 35, 10, or, 25, 30, 30, 15, something like that. Try to leave as little on the end as possible, draw out and stay out ahead of it best we can. But if you have a 6-month or 8-month project, we're probably going to draw every 30 days. Also, still going to require a substantial deposit, but each draw won't be as substantial.
Yeah, I know a lot of investors like to kind of do their draw schedules as like the first draw is really for materials. Are you willing to kind of work with that too?
Yeah, generally speaking, we always require an upfront draw unless they have a bank finance project, because a lot of times the bank won't actually put down a draw. So what we do though is we deal directly through the bank, provide them AIA documents, and work within their draw schedule. And then if there's bank fees that apply to it, sometimes they'll require a payment each time you come out to do a site inspection for a draw. They'll charge you 125, 150 bucks. So sometimes we've had people try to tell us to limit the draws just so they don't incur extra fees. But other than the bank financing, yes, we were always going to require a material draw. And then we try to stay out ahead of that best we can, because a lot of times the bills are going to be coming in, quicker than the draws are. So.
Yeah. Do you provide a W-9 at the beginning of the job?
Not unless it's requested. Like we have a insurance claim job that we were looking at the other day, and they requested a W-9 on the front end. Most commercial jobs are going to require one. As an investor, I would 100% ask your subcontractors for a W-9 at the beginning of the job.
Yeah. And back to the draw schedule, is that different for renos versus a commercial? Because I know a lot of times on like apartments or commercial ends, the payment schedule is kind of more like on a longer, like 30-day type timeline.
Yeah, I mean, we've dealt with as much as 45 and even 60 days on different ones. The people who have the longer draw schedules like that, generally we're going to require a larger deposit because we know that it's going to be farther gaps in between. So in 60 days, we can spend a lot of money in 60 days, 45 days, 30 days. So I think that that often stews I would say that's a negotiation at the beginning of the contract, because we negotiated on the residential and the commercial side. I feel like with most of our residential customers, though, we just give them a draw schedule that says we're going to draw every 2 to 4 weeks. And depending on where the job is, if there's, fast progress or whatever, it's going to dictate that. But as far as with investors, commercial projects, I feel like that's a negotiation. It's common that we'll get, they'll mark up a contract and we'll kind of go back and forth till both sides agree to the terms.
Right. Mark on Zoom wants to know, for a single family flip, how do you make sure your contractor finishes on time? And I assume he's talking about the subs and stuff too, and the whole project as a whole. How do you make sure it gets done on time?
That's a challenge. Part of it's going to be working with people that what you're getting, what to expect. And then also keeping them paid is often going to keep you at the front of the line. I often said that there's bigger companies out there who I got pushed to the front of the line because I offered to pay them within 7 to 10 business days. And some of their terms might be 30 to 45 with some of their other people. So if you want to stay on schedule, I say money talks. I say pay your subcontractors quick and or your general contractors quick, and they're going to want to be on your job, because otherwise, if you're making them wait, they'll often go take a small job in between just to get paid and then come back to yours. And then also just be familiar with who you're working with and don't go with the cheapest bidder.
Yeah, I know we're definitely going to touch on that here in a little bit. I want to get through a couple more questions, but do you agree to a bonus if you finish the job ahead of schedule versus a discount for going over expected date of completion?
Not typically. In commercial, they have liquidated damages occasionally. And honestly, I try to steer away from that best I can, because it can be on either side. And I want to say that a lot of times the person that's paying the bills doesn't recognize when they're causing the delays. And so we do the best we can to actually mark our delays and mark the reasons behind the delays. And, the better we document that, the better we, feel, I guess, like we've done a good job at the end at trying to help them see where they caused issues. Because if you change a cabinet color, and cabinets take 6 weeks to get in, you change a cabinet color 3 weeks into a project, that's going to cause delays. So we generally don't operate in that. It's in our best interest, though, and this is what I tell people. It's in our best interest to get in and get out, because every week that I'm there, between my office staff and my project manager, it's going to cost me $1,200 a week if I'm on your job longer than I said I'm going to be there. So we try to do the best we can to keep both sides honest with the start and finish date. But yeah, don't do bonuses, and try my best to avoid liquidated damages as well.
Yeah. So we talked about this off air just a little bit, but general contractors, they get kind of a bad rap sometimes. And so I know a lot of us, especially in the investor community and stuff, have hired subcontractors, general contractors, had issues with payments, all of those type of classic scenarios. How do we, and this is a heavy question, avoid those types of problems?
Well, I'd like to tell you there's an easy way to do it. I can tell you some of the things that'll help you avoid it, but it's completely unavoidable. I had a contractor years ago who decided they weren't going to be able to make the customer happy on a paint job and decided right after they had received their third draw that they were going to walk off the job because they didn't feel like they were going to be able to make the customer happy. I had a replacement in there within 2 days, and I did end up going after that contractor legally, which my attorney told me was probably not the best idea. That can't bleed blood from a turnip, but neither here nor there. I think what you do is you do the best you can to qualify them, but at the end of the day, sometimes you're still going to find yourself in that side, where you're upside down or you've hired somebody that's overpromised. And here's the other thing too, is I actually talk to my employees about this. I call it the rise and the fall theory. So you're going to have a lot of contractors are going to come in, they're going to do a great job for you, and then at some point they're going to fall off. They can fall off for many reasons. They can fall off because they take on too much work. They lose one of their best employees. Maybe a next generation, their son or a relative takes over their business. They can fall on hard times financially. Unfortunately, there's also could be drug issues. So what you got to do is you got to do the best you can to be aware of when they're doing great and when they're slipping. And if you're seeing a contractor slip on quality or reliability, you have to call them on it. You have to actually, you have to say it. You just got to say, hey, look, we're having issues with you. Is this going to continue to be a problem? And at some point, if it does continue to be a problem, just know they might be on their way down. And a lot of times too, you'll have these kind of relationships come and go. After 20 years, I have subcontractors that I've used and then gone through stints where I didn't work with them. And then they've come back and I've worked with them again. And then I've had other ones fall off completely. And you just really have to be aware. You have to be watching for those signs and those patterns, because some of them will come in hot and they'll do a great job for you right off the bat. But then once they think they've got you, they start venturing out and working for somebody else, taking on too much work or slipping on their quality of work.
Yeah. How would you pre-qualify those people if you want to start a relationship with a sub or general contractor? What are the things that you need to ask for?
First, you kind of got to do your typical background check on the Secretary of State, make sure they're actually a registered business, qualify their insurance. Don't just accept a document either. Like, make them list you as additionally insured and call the insurer who provides the document. Don't just assume that because you get a document in hand that it's good. Call the insurance provider that it allegedly comes from, make sure and qualify it, call the references, and beyond that, call the supply houses. If somebody's bad about paying their bill to their supply houses, if they've been cut off credit wise from the different supply houses around town, they're probably not a good fit. So there's a lot of ways to qualify contractors, but look for those firsthand referrals. Secondhand, third tier referrals aren't nearly as good, but if you know somebody that they've specifically worked for and you know what kind of experience they had, that's going to be a lot better than if you get a second or third tier. So there's a lot to do to qualify them. You can also run background checks and other things like that to make sure there's not a criminal element and other issues like that. It just depends, because if they're doing a substantial job for you, a little bit of time invested on the front end could save you a lot of headache on the back end.
Yeah, I know that even us personally have had that problem. Like, I asked for insurance and you get the insurance and it's not a valid insurance anymore. And they just happen to have it for like a month or something like that and send it to you, but you got to follow up on that.
Hand wrote, definitely stay away from one that's hand wrote.
Yeah. No handwritten insurance policies for people. If you're doing a project, is there a general price per square foot for rehab estimation? And I know that's a pretty broad question though.
Yeah, I typically would say no. And this is why. It's because, all right, if you have a 3,000 square foot house and it's, 1.5, 2 bath and 3 or 4 bedroom versus a 3 bed, 3 bath, 2-story versus single story, it's so hard to rely on any kind of cost per square foot. I think what you have to do is you have to come up with a clear scope. And you have to try to break that out into every line item, like every division of what's going to have to occur on that, and try to come up with a number for each one of those. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of people want it to be as easy as just a cost per square foot. But unless you're building like a new construction house, or you have a product that you've built before several times over, um, it's not like running 1,000 square feet of hardwood. Well, we can do that real easy. That's real easy to run the numbers. But if you start saying, all right, I'm going to remodel this bathroom, is you're going to put $1 square foot or $10 square foot tile in, you're gonna spend $300 on a plumbing fixture or $1,300. It gets real slippery real quick. So I try to avoid that question. I try to say, unless you've got like if you got a really good scope, I'll give you $1 per square foot, but I'm still going to go through and do my due diligence to figure out what the actual line items are. And then afterwards, I'll run the math backwards and be like, well, here's what it came out to per square foot. But I'm still going to take the steps and try to figure out every line item.
What's kind of, I know you kind of touched on that a little bit. What's kind of like a general price per square foot that you're trying to hit for like flooring, paint, roof, drywall, like when it comes to your subs on what you're paying them?
Well, I actually thought that I would do the contractors who are on this feed as well as the investors on this feed a favor by not answering that. And here's why. Is because there's guys out there that are charging less than what I pay. And I don't want to discourage that for anybody that's, paying a lower price and getting a good quality job. But on the other end, I don't want to discourage the other contractors who are charging a premium by saying that a lower amount should be what you're paying. So I feel like if you get a good quality product and you feel like it's a fair price, then that's great. That's what you should be after. But I feel like to each their own when it comes to that, because I do tend to pay a little bit more than I know some of the rates are out there, because a lot of the guys that you all are using, I've either used them before or worked with them on some level. But sometimes it's hard if you've got a guy that's a 1-man or 2-man crew. He often can't keep up with the demand that we have. So I might have to pay a little bit more, somebody that can keep up with our volume. But yeah, I was thinking about it from both sides. There's people who are on here and I know what they charge, and some of them, maybe don't know what I'm willing to pay, but yeah, we'll leave that untouched.
Yeah, I think it's just a good reminder too. You kind of get what you pay for a little bit too.
Certainly.
We're all trying to pinch pennies and stuff on the investor end and everything like that to increase our profit margins. But sometimes you just have to, like you said, ante up and pay some people sometimes a little bit more. How do you keep those good people? I know, like in general contracting, sometimes it's hard to keep good subs, and like you said, they have that rise and that fall. How are you keeping those good people with you and not losing them or getting them scalped by somebody else?
Well, a lot of times it comes down to the pay. I feel like if you pay people on time, you pay them well, you also keep work in front of them. And also too, I mean, we can't keep everybody working at all times. So sometimes it just means that you have to kind of be open with them. You have to be aware of your schedule. You have to let them know if there's downtime coming and when you think, work might resume. Because the better that you are with respecting their time and and respecting their pay, I feel like they're gonna want to work for you. At the end of the day.
Yeah. So, what's your best general contractor story?
Oh man. All right. So one time I walked into a house and there was carpet down in the master bedroom. There was carpet down in the living room, but there was no carpet in 2 of the bedrooms in the hallway. There was padding down. And so I called the flooring contractor and I said, hey man, when are they going to come finish this house? And he told me, he said, I'm pretty sure they finished it. And I said, no, I'm standing here right now. I said, looks like they didn't get the hallway or 2 of the bedrooms. I said, I don't know if the carpet frayed or, they got a stain on it or what, but they didn't finish. And he swears to me up and down that they finished. And so he hangs up, he's going to call his installer. And as I'm looking around, I realized that the closets in those 2 bedrooms both had carpet in them and they didn't have a straight cut in the doorway. So somebody came in and stole a hallway and 2 bedrooms worth of carpet out of a house that was already finished. So that's one of my better ones. That's one of my better ones. I I've probably got a couple dozen where something was stolen under weird circumstances, or, vandalized, or, there's like, you get me started on general contractor story. I don't think there's enough time this afternoon to really
Maybe we'll
cover all those.
have to have you back for a happy hour event and we can dig into those a little bit more. Um, so what's kind of the biggest job that you've ever taken on? Like you could say like work wise or price wise, either one.
Um, I would say difficulty wise, I would say that I've had some projects where they used a lot of products that were state of the art, not really common, that required a lot of research, that required, it required a whole lot of time studying products, getting myself familiar with, making subcontractors familiar with the types of products where, you know, technology doesn't necessarily come easy when, plumbing's kind of been the same for the last 25 years. If you throw a piece of plumbing in there that requires, Wi-Fi connections and, has electronics in it, and it's not just your standard valves, things like that. I'd say that those type of jobs have been the most difficult. Just when you have somebody now, at the same time, they're also my favorite because they do require you to think outside of the box. It's not just another white kitchen with a subway tile backsplash, which, we've got enough pictures of kitchens like that
Done a few.
for the portfolio. But I always say that the unique ones like that, the more complex ones, those are the biggest jobs I've taken on, because they eat up a lot of time, but the reward at the end is really cool to see something come to life.
So I get this a lot from general contractors and stuff of posting pictures of like work that other people have done that they have to go back and fix and stuff like that. So what's kind of the biggest thing that you've had to go back and fix from other people? Was it like roof or kitchen, electrical? Like what's kind of the thing that you see over and over again and you're just walk in, you're just like, I got to do this again type situation?
It's probably lack of structural knowledge. I can't tell you how many times somebody's cut a beam, overcut floor joist. So I'll tell you, one of the biggest horror stories I saw was I walked into a lady's house and there was a triple beam running through the living room, and two of the three triple beams had been completely notched out. And if you know anything about structure, they don't just stick a triple beam in there for nothing. So there was a major load bearing point that had been notched out for a plumbing drain. The ceiling was completely gone because the plumbing had leaked and blown out. So the ceiling was gone. Half the walls were taken down. There was no flooring on the floor in that area. And, so she starts to say, tell me what happened. And I had to break it to her, like, you've got a way bigger problem on your hand than you realize. It's not just that your drywall ceiling's falling down. You've got three floor joists that are way overcut. You've got a triple beam, which is a structural beam that's been notched out to where it's carrying 1/3 of the capacity it should be able to. Your plumbing's not run straight. So all this plumbing, even if these joists weren't overcut, all this plumbing's got to come out and be completely redone. And this was all before I even went to see the bathroom that was being remodeled upstairs. So this lady had hired the neighbor's babysitter's husband, who had been a contractor for 1 year, to do a major master bathroom remodel. And when I got upstairs, I saw that they had green board in the shower. Just a typical no-no. Even if you wet proof it, that's still, as a practice, that's way outside of what is common now. He didn't even have it wet proof. So they just have tile just stuck to green board in what's going to be a shower. The shower couldn't even be there because that's where that structural joist was underneath. So that was all going to have to be reworked. So I don't know how much money she had spent, but everything they had done had to come out, and then new work had been created because of all the structural damage that had been done for the beams and the joists on the first, between the first and second floor. So that was probably one of the worst I've ever seen, but I've actually seen two or three other times where structural joist or floor joist have been way overcut, especially on older houses where you've got like 8-inch floor joist, and they'll take like a 3-inch, 4-inch drain through an 8-inch joist. And it's just their lack of knowledge, unfortunately, for what can be done structurally when remodeling a bathroom.
So, as an investor that's going in to try to buy that home that is like that, what are kind of some key things that I should maybe be looking for that are big ticket items? Like you just said, like structural type stuff where people are running plumbing right through floor joists and stuff like that. And what are those signs? Because I might not be able to see behind the walls, but what is maybe some key indicators of, hey, this house might need a lot more work than what I'm expecting, and I need to plan for that down the road?
Well, we used to joke like there was dead giveaways, like real plumbers don't use blue colored glue. So you have things like that. Like look for DIY, obvious DIY stuff. Like if you have weird finishes around tile, it's often going to be that a real experienced tile person did not lay that job. If you see weird trim joints, if you see corner moldings, that are prefabricated, you didn't have a real good trim carpenter in there, or you just had somebody DIYing because they used a block to finish off a corner. There's going to be some dead giveaways when it comes to finish work that real contractors wouldn't have done. And DIY stuff's always something to look out for. And then other things are going to just be like if you see major cracking that's been caulked or filled in on outside of brick and outside of foundations, keep an eye too on what the gutters are doing. If they don't have good downspouts, if they don't have elbows and splash blocks, things like that are going to be indications of probably leaks in crawl space, major settlement that's occurred. I would also say, hire a home inspector, and a good one. If you're buying a property and you hire a good home inspector who's thorough, don't be worried about them blowing up the deal. Instead, just be worried about buying something that you shouldn't have bought or overpaying for something. Because I had one specifically where the people had roots growing through their sewer system, and literally the previous homeowner had just taken the cap off the sewer inside the crawl space. So every time it started to back up, the water would just overflow into the crawl space. And eventually, at some point, it started smelling really bad in their house, as you can imagine. And this was because somebody had DIY'd all this work, which I knew as soon as I started looking at the plumbing, because your P-traps under the sink were too long. Like I don't know the specifics on that, but there's specific code to that, to where if your length of your P-trap should only be a certain length, because if it's too much, then it's not getting enough air and it'll slow drain and gargle. But as soon as I looked under the sinks, I see these extremely long P-traps. And then, so that was like one of the first indications. As I look around, I see the blue plumbing glue in the crawl space. I see a lot of stuff that was questionable. And so then what you had is you had, like I said, they had just taken the cap off the sewer inside the crawl space. So anytime that plumbing would start backing up, it would just start to overflow into the crawl space. And eventually when the smell started to get, after they lived in it for a while, because it was an investor who had flipped it, and it was a poorly done cheap flip with a lot of DIY work. Once somebody started living in it and that sewer started backing up regularly, it started overflowing that crawl space. That developed a pretty bad sewer smell. And then we ended up having to replace the sewer all the way from the street to the house after we TV'd it and realized there's a bunch of roots in it. So yeah, get a good home inspector. Not a bad idea either to TV the sewer if it's an older house with possibly a cast iron sewer.
Yeah. So in that type of scenario where someone had flipped a house and then they called you all in, there were some problems and things like that, do you know what the homeowner could do about that? I mean, I guess you would have to like have a warranty or something on the actual flip, but I mean, who would be held liable to that? Just the new homeowner on them to fix it?
Well, no, and it just depends on what. There's always the concern that you invest some money in to try to get your money back, and you're paying those legal fees, but they do have repercussions against not only the previous owner, but if they hired a home inspector who didn't thoroughly do their job, there's also potentially some repercussions there as well, which I got a couple of good buddies that are home inspectors. They probably won't like me saying that, but honestly, they as a homeowner, it just depends on, like, this homeowner chose to just let the sleeping dog lie. They didn't do anything about it. They just kind of absorbed it. It was close to Christmas, and I actually gave them the sewer at cost because I felt really bad. And this was actually back pretty close to around recession time, and it wasn't like things were great for anybody. So I ended up just charging it to them at cost because I would have felt bad to take any profit on that. I'd already done some work in the property for them, and but they definitely could have gone back after the previous owner. There was, and this was also too before the big push of where I feel like the investor community as well as the homeowner community got a little more wise to the potential dangers out there. And the home inspection community honestly picked up their game as well and started living up to a little bit higher level expectation and trying to be more thorough. And, back in the 2009 through 12 period, I saw a lot of really, really terrible home inspection reports. I read through many of them, and I wrote many notes and many harsh emails to different realtors and different home inspectors. And so I want to say that the realtors, the home inspectors, the investors, everybody got more wise to that and understanding, because the major remodel that he had done, they should have checked for permits. And had they checked for permits and realized there was no permits, they would have been able to have a much stronger negotiating ability as well as repercussions immediately and off the bat. So there was a lot of checks and balances there that weren't done that I feel like have improved in the last decade.
Yeah, definitely more knowledge. Rising tide raises all ships. We all need to hold each other to better standards and stuff.
Certainly.
On those things. Ronnie made a comment on Facebook that the 2019-2020 remodel style is white shaker and subway tile.
That's right.
Done plenty of those. So kind of along those lines too, are you seeing kind of maybe that go away, or is that still holding strong? And where do you see it going in the future, and like what homeowners like, or what renovators and flippers like to do?
White's timeless. I mean, as much as I'm knocking it, I actually love white cabinets. I just get tired of all of our pictures looking like they were taken in the same house. I'd rather some different ones for the highlight reel, but it's such a timeless look. I feel like there's about 1,000 shades of white right now. So you're seeing a lot of like almost grayish whites and every other color white. So they're trying to do what they can to add a little more to it. Plus, I think you're seeing like a lot of people are changing it up with the granite, and then you're seeing a lot more like accent islands and things like that to add some flavor to it. I love a good accent island on a project. And heck, I've seen them spend as much money on the island as they almost did the rest of the kitchen if they really kick them up. So, but yeah, I don't think it's going to go away. I think white will continue to be timeless. I built back when cherry cabinets were actually the thing, and I'm so glad those went away, because you had these kitchens that just turned out like dungeons, really dark. And my first house that I built for myself, my first personal house, had the cherry cabinets, and but I think you'll probably see like stained cabinets kind of come back in and trend in and out. Like, I love some stained woodwork, but you kind of had oak ruin that for a lot of people. But I think with birch cabinets and some of the other pretty woods out there, cherry, hopefully you see a little more stained cabinets come back.
Yeah. So on your jobs, what's the biggest loss that you've taken, whether it be like underbidding it and it ended up just going out of control, or maybe like a theft or something like that? What's kind of like your horror story on the job site and financial part of it?
Well, I've probably had both of those. I've had some where I've lost my ass, and then I've had some where, I've lost things, like things stolen, things busted out. We went through a period one summer, and it actually was common, but in the summer when the kids were out, we'd always get busted windows. they'd just come through the neighborhoods and, unsupervised and throw rocks through the windows. And it happened almost every year. Um, as far as the biggest actual theft, I had a whole cabinet package stole out of a house one time. I think they dropped them on a Friday to install Monday. Hard lesson learned. I had some pretty large lumber packages actually stolen too. I've had a few HVAC units cut and stolen, and had a window package I think stolen one time, door package. I mean, you name it, I've seen it over the years. But as far as the biggest loss, I think one of the first custom houses I built was one of the worst ones I lost my ass on, because the cabinet budget I think was like $6,000, and they put $25,000 worth of cabinets in, and it was the missing the line items. We kind of gave them a per square foot cost, and there was like 1,100 feet of driveway in this project. So because it was on a farm, it was on a hill, so we had all this driveway. There was 900 feet of water lines from the street to the house, which had to be sized up, as well as have an extra pump on in order to get the water there and still have any kind of pressure. So probably, if anything, it was just a lot of rookie mistakes. It was early in business and just not well priced.
Yeah. What do you do when you have materials like stolen off a job site or tools? Like, how do you handle that?
You usually will file a police report. You hope that maybe somebody saw it. I think now it's probably now's actually a much better time. You have so many cameras out there. You have so many people with their eyes on everything. So I don't feel like the times are what they once were. Biggest loss too. I had I remember this one now. I had three townhouses, and all three of them, this is back when they still used soft copper in the groundworks. And I had the soft copper laid for all three, and we were going to pour concrete the next day. And somebody came in that night and stole all three townhouses, ripped them completely bare of all the soft copper. And these are all like 1,100 square foot, 2-bed, 3-bath. Two bath, 3-bed townhouses. But yeah, this is back before they started using CPVC and PEX. So, but anyway, to
How much copper is that? What's the price on the copper?
I can't remember. I mean, this had to be like 04, 03, 04. I don't know. There's got to be somebody on there that plumbs that knows about the time CPVC became the big thing.
Yeah.
But I think it was sometime probably like 03, 04, somewhere in there. And yeah, somebody came the night before and just yanked all three. They had all had their plumbing inspection. We're going to get concrete poured the next day. And then we came in and concrete guy calls. He's like, "There's no copper in this slab." Any of them.
3 homes. That's a lot. That's a busy night for sure.
Dude, that was a real busy night.
So like if I wanted to get into flipping, right? And I'm looking at a fixer-upper type home.
Mm-hmm.
If you were looking at it, what's kind of those key things that would be like, yes, this makes a great home to do some work in? I know I've heard a lot about like having the floor joist and the ceiling joist run the same way, that you can kind of add a second level, or like, oh man, this tile here, it'll stay good forever. Just reglaze it. It's good. Where are those things where I can save money, or like, yes, this home is perfect, for type of investment and type things, and easy for you to work on basically.
Good layouts are key. Obviously any realtor watching will say location, but what we really got to say is the layout needs to be good, because the less walls you can move, the less plumbing you can move. When it really comes down to it, electric, plumbing, your mechanicals for the house are really going to drive the price up. And if you're moving the plumbing pretty far to create a better layout, or if you're adding more plumbing, things like that, that's going to really kick up the cost. If you're adding square footage, it's got to be a value that can be gained back for the area, because Lexington's really it's got a lot of great houses that fall in that 1,100, 1,200 square feet range, to where people are looking to make those 1,600, 2,000 square feet. So there's a lot of great houses out there, but it's trying to build up rather than out. that's going to be usually cheaper. And then trying to find good layouts where you don't, if you do have to take out walls, they're not load bearing. If you do have to move plumbing, you don't have the challenge of completely having to reconfigure floor joists. It's going to be conducive of a much more affordable flip.
Right. Is there anything else that you want to add to it? I've run out of questions here. I know that you said that you want to kind of maybe dig in a little bit more on some like really more in-depth things.
I don't have any topics right offhand. I'll tell you another contractor story. So I had a house I was building next to a police officer, and his house was next to another police officer, and they had just got done wiring the house. And the next day I came in, and somebody had stripped the house almost completely bare of all the wire that was already put in. And in fact, a few places where you had your your little H nail hooks to hold the wire up, they had just clipped it on both sides. So there was little nubs of wire that were like 3 inches, kind of all over the ceilings throughout the house. And I was like, man, I just thought it was the craziest thing, considering a cop lived right next door, that they just came through the night and completely robbed that one blind. So no, not just another interesting one there.
Yeah, cruiser out front and everything.
Well, there was a cruiser out front, and like I said, right next to him was another one. So you had this house, and then cop right next to him. And I even went and talked to him because that guy was real cool. I was building next to him, and I always like to try to talk to whoever I was building next to, because you're not just encroaching, you're not just imposing on the person you're constructing for or building for, you're imposing usually on the neighbors as well. So I always tried to keep a real good working relationship with the neighbors when we were building a new product next to him. So I went over and talked to him, and I was like, hey man, I want you to see something. And so brought him over and just showed him what had happened.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, thank you for coming on, Roger. And it's been just great having you. I think it was very insightful, and you provided a lot of value on kind of that general contractor perspective. And hopefully, we all can be a little bit better and like watch out for some of those red flags and that rise and fall that kind of comes with having your subs and general contractors work for you. If people want to get in contact with you and learn more or participate further in a conversation about general contractors, where can they reach you?
So I like to talk to people, and I love sharing my knowledge. Sometimes I complain that my employees have gotten so good at what they do, they don't call me anymore with problems. So you guys can call me on my cell phone, 859-983-9469. You can email me at teddy@andersonandrodgers.com. Rodgers got a D in it. And visit our website, www.andersonandrodgers.com. Then we've got a couple platforms out there. House is probably my favorite one. We've got over 30 projects on House. It's been a great platform for us to get seen. And then also they postponed it, but we are on the remodeling tour of homes again this year. They are doing it virtually. So they won't actually be letting anybody go to the house. I'm not sure the exact start date, but go to the BIA website for any updates on that. And then also for all you investors that want to know a good place to find subcontractors, join the BIA. Be a part of that community, because if you guys are kind of like contractors to a degree, and a lot of you are contracting your own work. So being a part of the BIA, you're going to find some 1,100, 1,200 members, maybe more than that, in Central Kentucky. And a lot of these guys are going to be siding specialists that have been in business as long as me, or painters that have been in business as long as me. So I would definitely recommend it, but love to see you guys help with the traffic to the remodeling tour, and definitely give me a shout if y'all want to talk sometime.
Yeah. So could you give me your phone number one more time? Make sure I have it.
Sure. It's 859-983-9469.
Okay, and I'll put that contact information in the comments so everybody can get a hold of you and whenever they see it for the replay and stuff too. But definitely, thanks for coming on, Teddy, and we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.